Seyigcwele insimbi yemfica kusihlwa ngolesibili lomuhla singena ke ehlelweni Itsini iPhalamende lomuhla kanti ke maswati lamahle singena ehlelweni nje sibuya kiyo inkulumo yendvuna yelitiko letemafa umhlonishwa niRechenberg lebeyikatse ithula ke wona emaphakelo alo live indvuna ithule emaphakelo labita 32.6 billion wemalangeni ekumaphakelo ekatunakekela tidzingo telive laseSwatini kanti ke nayithula emaphakelo ayo indvuna ivetile ukuthi ithula lamaphakelo nje ahambisana ngco nenkulumo yesilo semhlaba engonyama inkosi Mswati wesithathu leya sithula ke nayivula yona iPhalamende yeli12 sigaba sesibili sayo iPhalamende asingene ke endlini sive ukuthi ingabe amaphakelo ahambe njani.
Mr. Speaker, it's my great honor and privilege to present to this esteemed House my second budget speech and national budget estimates for the 2025-2026 financial year at the second session of this 12th Parliament for the Kingdom of Eswatini. Mr. Speaker, I humbly stand before you today and give all thanks and glory to our Heavenly Father for His spirit of unity over our nation. We thank Him for His mercy and the promises of His word in these uncertain times. The scripture for this year's speech is taken from Romans 12, verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. Our united prayer today is for the transformation of our minds to seek and find God's perfect will for our nation, to take us into His promised land that He has prepared for us. We acknowledge that this is no easy task. There are rivers to cross, sacrifices to be made, and giants to conquer. However, we also know that if we seek His presence, His will, and His wisdom, that nothing is impossible for us. Mr. Speaker, this promise is not possible without the mandate and wisdom from His Majesty for us to stop wandering in the desert and to enter the promised land of unity, transformation, and opportunity. His Majesty the King has given us His command in His speech from the throne at the opening of Parliament. And Honourable Speaker, we're aligned with His vision for our nation. In doing so, His Majesty has commanded that we improve service delivery, fight corruption, and prioritise the youth, the elderly, and the unemployed. Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank His Excellency, the Right Honourable Prime Minister, and my colleagues in Cabinet for their tireless efforts in supporting me in the preparation of this budget and in faithfully executing His Majesty's vision for our country. Mr. Speaker, this budget was made possible by the dedication and expertise of the team at the Ministry of Finance and many other organizations and professional groups that presented expert briefs during the budget formulation meetings in their respective line ministries, especially the Planning and Budgeting Committee, what refers PBC. I wish to extend my sincere gratitude to all of them. Mr. Speaker, following the very successful national events, emboldened by His Majesty's Nkwe Declaration, I can confidently say that the Kingdom of Eswatini is poised for economic growth. The domestic economy is growing at an impressive rate, and the nation stands united against a backdrop of peace and stability. It's now incumbent on us to continue to put the policies and budgets in place to grow the economy, create jobs, and improve service delivery and uplift our people. Mr. Speaker, I must caution, however, that never in my 7 years of presenting the budget has the world seemed less certain or more fragmented. At regional, continental, and global level, countries are at odds and ideologies are colliding. Economies are straining under the yoke of protectionism and nationalism. What used to seem certain is now being tested and dismantled on a global stage in real time. However, we need to remain steadfast in our faith, dedicated to our national identity, and uncompromising in our pursuit of growing our economy and aligning with our principles and allies. Mr. Speaker, it'll be remiss of me to promise this honourable House that our journey will be easy, or that crossing into the promised land will be without pain or sacrifice. We still have to confront and defeat the giants of corruption, mediocrity, and not providing enough job opportunities for our youth. The theme for this year's budget is transformation for growth. Transformation demands that we admit our failings and strive to do things better. This budget is made up of the recurrent budget and a capital budget. It is the capital budget that has the biggest impact on growth. For this reason, Cabinet has been very intentional by increasing the recurrent budget by 8.4%, which excludes the contingency fund, and the capital budget by 14.4%. This is why we can confidently say that this budget is a pro-growth budget. Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure today to announce that our economy is predicted to grow at 8.3% in 2025-2026. This is against the solid growth figures of 5% in growth in 2023 and 4.8% growth in 2024. This will be a remarkable achievement as it's the highest predicted GDP growth in the region and one of the highest in the world. We have laid the foundations to ensure that this growth is both sustainable and achievable. Growing our economy allows us to spend more on critical needs like health and education. It allows us to safely and sustainably borrow more to improve our infrastructure and enables us to assist more vulnerable people in our communities. If we don't continue to grow our economy, we'll not be able to create more jobs, provide more services, or improve our quality of life. This sustained economic performance is translated to allowing an increase of expenditure by 3.19 billion emalangeni, or 10.9%. And even though we are borrowing more, because our economy is growing faster than our debt, the debt to GDP ratio in fact stabilizes at 40.5%. Mr. Speaker, you'll recall that there was a strong call at Sibaya for eMaswati at community level to have input in the budget. I'm grateful that for the first time ever, this process has kicked off in 2024. The approach was to sensitize all eMaswati on the government budgeting processes. The Planning and Budgeting Committee met with the chiefs, with the MPs, Tinduna Titinkundla, and the Community Development Councils in all the 4 regions of the country on this subject. Mr. Speaker, the government is happy to report that Eswatini is qualified for the World Bank International Development Agency, what we refer to as IDA funding. This funding is highly concessional, as 40% of it is grant and 60% is a loan. This year, our IDA window is $27 million. Our fiscal prudence and business-friendly approach has meant that our economy has been rewarded with an upgrade in the country's sovereign credit rating from B3 to B2 by Moody's rating agency. This means that Eswatini has been recognized as a safer and better place to invest and do business, and it reduces our cost of borrowing. Mr. Speaker, Eswatini also made history this year when our first sovereign bond was registered with the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. The bond was oversubscribed, meaning that investors were expressing their confidence in the sustainable economic future of our country. With the Moody's country upgrade, our Johannesburg Stock Exchange rating was also upgraded to investment grade. This should also reduce the cost of our bonds and broaden the market. Mr. Speaker, despite our Southern Africa Customs Union receipts declining by 2.6 billion emalangeni, we've been able to close the gap by relying on our SACU Stabilization Fund. The fund currently stands at 2.5 billion emalangeni, and 1 billion emalangeni will be drawn down to support this budget. Again, Eswatini is picking the fruit of good seed that was planted. But we need to remain vigilant as this year we are budgeting to spend 2.5 billion emalangeni on servicing interest alone. The projected budget deficit of 3% is amongst the lowest in the region. Previous years of fiscal discipline are now starting to show results. Mr. Speaker, I'm also excited to announce the planned establishment of a sovereign wealth fund in Eswatini with the support of the Commonwealth. The purpose of the fund will be to consolidate, professionalize, and align the government's holdings into a single entity, according to international best practice, for the benefit of our nation. The fund is expected to be launched in April 2025. Eswatini Revenue Services, ERS, is again projecting a record revenue estimate in the year 2024-25 They will be collecting 14.5 billion emalangeni, and this is projected to increase to 16.5 billion emalangeni in 2025-26. I wish to commend ERS for the outstanding performance, as the increase of 2 billion is a function of broadening the tax base as opposed to increasing tax. The global economic outlook is expected to remain steady, though it continues to perform below potential. This is attributable to the lingering effects of the intensifying geopolitical tensions, which triggered supply chain disruptions and elevated global inflationary pressures, thereby heightening economic vulnerabilities for most countries. However, supportive financial conditions emanating from a less restrictive monetary policy stance, as well as a robust labor markets in the United States, have offset the downward revision in major economies. Hence, global growth is projected to rise from 3.2% in 2024 to 3.3% in 2025 and 2026. It's according to the IMF and World Bank Economic Outlook. Similarly, the Sub-Saharan Africa region economic activity is projected to grow by 3.8% in 2024 and further rise to 4.2% in 2025 and 2026, reflecting the easing inflationary pressures and less restrictive financial conditions. South Africa's growth is projected to rise from 0.8% in 2024 to 1.5% and 1.6% in 2025 and 2026 respectively, owing to the waning effects of load shedding and improved logistics, which would support the rebound in economic activity and thus also improving demand for Eswatini's exports. The domestic economy reflected resilience as economic activity rebounded strongly in 2023. Real gross domestic product, GDP, increased by 5% from a contraction of 0.1% in 2022. In 2023, growth was strongly underpinned by increasing domestic demand induced by national events. These events spurred activities in some of the demand-driven sectors such as the information and communication and wholesale and retail. Government operations also reflected a rebound in the period backed by the improved fiscal stance in line with higher SACA receipts, as well as the increased demand for government services associated with the election activities. Similarly, mining activities increased in 2023, contributing 0.36 percentage points to overall real GDP growth. The sector benefited from expansions and new investments in coal production. On the contrary, agriculture production slumped in 2023, with the sector affected by increasing erratic weather conditions during the farming season. Maize production declined by 33%, while sugarcane output contracted by 2.7% in this period. According to the latest predictions, GDP projection review of January 2025, real GDP growth in 2024 will be 4.8%, which was previously projected at 3.6% in September 2024. Manufacturing activity is expected to have sustained the growth momentum in 2024, mainly the manufacture of sugar, as well as the manufacturing of chemicals, rebounding from a slow growth in 2023. Similarly, primary activity, including the growth of crops in the agriculture and forestry subsectors, is expected to slightly rebound in anticipation of better yields, mainly in the sugar industry, previously affected by unfavorable weather conditions. On the contrary, growth in the service sectors is expected to have slowed in 2024 on account of 2023's base effects linked to the national elections. The slowdown in activity will be observed in sectors such as wholesale and retail, reflecting winding down of consumption demand, as well as public administration, due to lower hiring compared to 2023. Mr. Speaker, positive economic prospects are envisaged as in the medium term, as economic activity is projected to accelerate by an average of 5.4 percentage points between 2025 and 2027. The medium-term growth will be supported by expansions in energy-related projects, as well as the upscaled implementation of public sector investment projects such as the Mbageni Dam under the MWAB project, construction of the MR14 and MR21 roads, construction of the Parliament building, the Strategic Oil Reserve, as well as the completion of the International Conference Centre and the five-star hotel, amongst others. Domestic real GDP is projected to peak at 8.3% in 2025 from a growth of 4.8% in 2024. The significant acceleration in economic growth is largely accounted for by the upscaled construction activity of the earmarked projects and is projected to directly contribute 2.5 percentage points to the overall growth outcome in 2025. In 2025, other supporting sectors such as transportation, quarried stone production, manufacturing of construction material, wholesale and retail, and financial services will also benefit from the construction activity and contribute positively to the overall outcome. In the primary sector, double-digit growth is expected for mining and quarrying and forestry activities. The mining and quarrying subsector growth will be on account of expansions in coal mining and anticipated increase in quarried stone production to support construction activities, primarily of the big dams and the planned roads. GDP growth is projected to slow down in the outer years to 4.8% in 2026 and 3.1% in 2027, as projected by our macro forecasting team. The envisaged deceleration in economic growth is on account of high base effects from 2025, coupled with the completion of some projects with prospectively slower replacement ratios. The implementation of public and private projects, in other words, the energy projects, the roads, the dams, and other infrastructure projects, will continue in the medium term and conditional on availability of funding. The mining sector is expected to maintain strong growth, buoyed by increased production in coal and exploration of other minerals. The tourism sector is expected to recover to pre-COVID levels and maintain steady growth in the medium term. Strong growth is also expected in the textile industry, driven by expansions in factory shells and a better penetration of markets, particularly the US markets under AGOA. The government will be very intentional to counter these lower projected figures by targeting the pro-growth sectors like mining, ICT, and agriculture. Mr. Speaker, domestic inflationary pressures eased in 2024 as headline inflation averaged 4% in the year compared to an average of 5% in 2023. This was mainly attributable to the slowdown in food inflation, which fell from 8.9 percentage points from 12.8% in 2023 to 3.9% in 2024. On the other hand, inflation for housing rentals and utilities increased from 4.8% in 2023 to 7% in 2024, as this category responded to an upward tariff adjustment made effective on the 1st of April 2024. Domestic inflation is expected to remain within the budget band of 3 to 6% in the short to medium term. In the medium term, international oil prices are expected to remain below $75 a barrel due to a reduction in global demand and elevated global oil production. The rand exchange rate to the US dollar is anticipated to be stable in the medium term. However, it faces a higher risk of volatility and mild depreciation due to the uncertainty surrounding US policies over the next 4 years. Upside pressure on the inflation outlook is still expected, mainly due to anticipated hikes in administered prices, such as electricity and water tariffs in 2025. The inflation forecasts are envisaged to increase, averaging slightly above 4.5% for both 2025 and 2026. External sector projections indicate that Eswatini's current account balance will post a surplus of 956.7 million emalangeni in 2024, following a current account surplus of 1.9 billion recorded in 2023. The 2024 current account surplus is informed by a projected trade surplus of 3.8 billion emalangeni, as exports continue to grow faster than imports. Data for January to November 2024 indicates that leading export commodities, namely soft drink concentrates and sugar, which account for over 60% of total exports, have performed well in 2024. Eswatini's main trading partner for exports and imports is South Africa, as 70% of merchandise goods are sold and received from that market. Our country's positive merchandise trade balance is, however, eroded by the growing deficit of the services account balance, which emanates mainly from multinationals sourcing valuable services from outside the country. SACA receipts continue to influence the current account balance. However, SACA receipts are projected to decline from 2025-2026 financial year into the outer years. This, coupled with an increase in payments for services, is expected to weaken the current account balance going forward. The Central Bank of Eswatini pursued an accommodative stance in 2024, reducing the discount rate by a cumulative 50 basis points. The bank reduced the discount rate by 25 basis points to 7.25% in September 2024, and another 25 basis points to 7% in November 2024. This stance was broadly in line with the easing of global and regional monetary policy conditions, the lower domestic inflation outcomes, and the improved inflation outlook for the domestic economy. Consequently, commercial banks reduced the prime lending rate by some 50 basis points over the year, from 11% to 10.5% in November 2024, a conducive policy stance to boost credit extension to the private sector, hence economic growth. In executing its mandate, the central bank remains cognizant of the need to strike a balance between maintaining price and financial stability while supporting domestic economic growth. The bank remains conscious of the monetary policy that the monetary policy is anchored on a fixed exchange rate regime, hence remains committed to curbing capital flight to protect the reserves and ensure that the one-on-one peg of the Lilangeni to the South African Rand is maintained. The short to medium term monetary policy outlook remains uncertain with a downward bias. However, the global environment remains highly fluid with geopolitical tension, which, if they escalate, can cause supply chain disruptions and reversals in the disinflation path. Following the successful listing of the 4 billion South Africa Rand bond program on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, a total of 400 million rands was raised in May 2024 for a period of 3 years, and these funds have helped the government meet some of its financing needs. The government will be going back to the South African stock market soon for further issuance. It's expected that the conditions are likely to become more favorable following the improvement of the country's credit rating on the domestic and international front and the declining interest rate environment. The government of Eswatini's long-term local currency and foreign currency issuer rating was upgraded in November 2024 from B3 to B2. The rating of our bonds on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange has improved to investment grade. This improved credit rating was due to a good track record of the country's fiscal policy effectiveness, which had led to an improved fiscal trajectory, and government's commitment to fiscal consolidation and institutional reforms such as the SACU Stabilization Fund and the clearing of arrears. Eswatini's stock of gross official reserves improved markedly in the 2024-2025 financial year, mainly due to higher SACU revenues, increased foreign currency trades with local banks, as well as internal investment swap with a local non-bank institution. Consequently, gross official reserves increased by 19.2% year-on-year between April and November of 2024, from an average growth of 8.1% over the same period in 2023. However, the average import cover fell from 2.7 months in the first 8 months of 2023-2024 to 2.5 months over the same period in 2024-2025, mainly due to the sharper increase in the country's import bill. In the short to medium term, gross official reserves are expected to remain under pressure due to the anticipated decline in SACU revenues in 2025-2026 and the persistent rise of imports. Mr. Speaker, in pursuit of financial inclusion and economic growth, the country has licensed MT and fintech services as an authorized dealer with limited authority through the Central Bank of Eswatini. The system allows a Maswati residing in South Africa to send money back home to support their families using their mobile phones, facilitating cross-border money transfers. This digital transformation solution will help close the gap between unbanked and traditional banking services while ensuring compliance with applicable laws and regulations. This year has also seen significant progress on the planned conversion of the Swaziland Building Society into a bank. Following SBS's annual general meeting, the voting results indicated that 94% of permanent shareholders supported the intention to convert to a bank. If this conversion milestone is ultimately achieved, the number of active banks in Eswatini will increase to 5. Mr. Speaker, the Eswatini banking sector remains profitable, with industry after-tax profits increasing by 7.9% year-on-year to 139.3 million emalangeni, compared to the previous year's 156.8 million emalangeni. The industry is well capitalized, with an industry capital adequacy ratio reported at 18.3% and common equity capital at 16.2%. These ratios satisfied the minimum regulatory requirements of 8% total minimum regulatory capital and 4.5% common equity capital, respectively, under the Basel II capital framework. The industry's non-performing loan ratio averaged 6.9%, marking a 0.2% increase from the previous quarter's 6.7%. The industry remains liquid and reports satisfactory liquidity levels above the statutory minimum requirements of 22% for commercial banks and 20.5% for development banks. The industry's liquidity increased by 34.8% compared to the previous year, which stood at 29.9%. The non-bank financial industry sector plays a pivotal role in the country's financial sector, holding assets valued at 106.1 billion emalangeni, equivalent to 71% of the financial sector's assets. Pension funds and insurance companies grew by 11.6%, with pension assets reaching 50.1 billion emalangeni. However, risks such as asset concentration and exposure to foreign markets persist, particularly for pension funds heavily invested overseas. The short-term insurance sector faces profitability challenges. Through the long-term segment remains resilient. Transparency concerns and dependence on unsecured household credit, which constitutes 51.6% of household debt, are key challenges requiring careful oversight. Mr. Speaker, the annual growth in private sector credit extension slowed down between April and October 2024, in part due to the rapid rise in inflation in 2022 and 2023. Year on year, the average growth in private sector credit decelerated from 10% between April and October 2023 to an average of 8.8% in the same period in 2024. Growth in the private sector credit was driven both by business and the household sector. Credit to business increased at an average of 12.7% year on year, driven by sectors such as manufacturing, transport and communications, distribution and tourism, as well as community, social, and personal services. Annual growth in credit to households stood at 6% at the backdrop of improved motor vehicle loans. In line with positive developments in private sector credit, broad money supply, which is the amount of money circulating in the economy, improved between April and October 2024 compared to 2023. Annual growth in broad money supply rose from 4.6% in the first 7 months of 2023-2024 to 10% in the same period of 2024-2025, as both quasi-money supply, which is liquid but not cash assets, and narrow money supply, which is money held by the central bank, expanded. In the short to medium term, growth in the private sector credit and money supply is expected to remain stable and positive respectively. Despite the relatively lower borrowing rates and improved economic growth in outer years, disposable incomes are forecasted to remain under pressure from global and regional factors. Mr. Speaker, the government has strategically focused on amplifying Eswatini's export footprint through the comprehensive trade agreements, including SACU, SADC, COMESA, and AFCFTA. A priority agenda includes concluding AFCFTA negotiations, particularly in sensitive categories, and advancing tripartite free trade area discussions. Key to the strategy is the execution of plans such as the AFCFTA implementation strategy and the SADC EU Economic Partnership Agreement strategy, which are underpinned by investor stakeholder engagement and capacity building workshops. SEDCO's pivotal role in MSME advancement is marked by programs such as the Entrepreneur of the Year Awards and the Business Incubation Program, which foster enterprise development and digital integration. Legislative advancements, including the Citizens Economic Empowerment Act, further entrench the MSME sector's importance. Collaborative efforts with organizations like Junior Achievement underscores our commitment to nurturing youth entrepreneurship, ensuring MSMEs remain integral to socioeconomic progress. The Eswatini Competitions Commission is instrumental in fostering a competitive business environment critical for economic vitality. By addressing anti-competitive practices and ensuring a level playing field through merger regulation, the Commission has bolstered investor confidence, as evidenced by the approval of 28 mergers in the 2024-2025 financial year. Consumer protection is equally prioritized with a 98% solution rate for complaints, substantial compensation for violations, and proactive market monitoring to curb excessive pricing and ensuring transparency.
Everybody needs an umbrella for a rainy day. A little something you could put away. A bit of patience goes a really long way. And with these seeds I carry hopes of better days. Whose fruits are these anyway? Wait a minute, okay I get it. Live for today but prepare for the future. Make sure you cover your welfare is crucial. This for the mothers and lovers and little ones. Taking care of those is business as usual.
For your future, for your life.
Channel Maswati is regulated by the Eswatini Communications Commission through the Broadcasting Code and Broadcasting Guidelines. Under these instruments, the station commits to broadcasting information and news that have been fact-checked, as well as programs and content in respectful language with no elements of hate speech and with no elements of violence or sexual activity. If you hear any unsuitable content on the station, you have a right to voice your complaints with the station management. Should you not be satisfied with the response or action taken, you can escalate your complaint to the Communications Commission at PO Box 7811 Mbabane or call 2406 7000 or send an email to info@esccom.org.sc. Visit www.esccom.org.sc for more information.
Lamahle sizawuchubeka nayo ke yona inzima ukuthi ngabe emaphakelo enduna achubeka kanjani kulandzela ukuthi umhlonishwa ndunankulu acele ukuthi ku-revoke standing order kude khona kuchubeka yona-ke inqubo yephalamende induna ichubeke nekutfula wona-ke emaphakelo elive.
Mr. Speaker, the government's commitment to enhancing intellectual property administration is pivotal to transforming Eswatini into an export-driven, diversified economy. The operationalization of the Eswatini Copyright and Neighboring Rights Society aims to ensure artists benefit from royalties, thereby stimulate economic growth and addressing youth unemployment. The cooperative sector, which will receive a significant boost of 30 million emelangeni in support from the German cooperative and Raiffeisen Confederation, including the establishment of a local office and a cooperative bank. This financial and technical backing is poised to strengthen the cooperative's movement's role in economic development. Mr. Speaker, the construction of the Johnson Workwear factory shell is on track for completion within 6 months. Once operational, this facility is expected to create over 2,000 jobs. Additionally, the reconstruction of the previously burned down factory shell at Hlatikulu has been completed, potentially providing employment for 450 individuals. Other operations at the Kamula factory shell are set to have commenced in January, while the Nzevane factory shell has recently been finalized, with an anticipated workforce of slightly over 1,000 employees. The development of factory shells at Ngwenya and Pigs Peak are being finalized, which are projected to offer employment opportunities for approximately 1,450 people, respectively. Mr. Speaker, a strategic policy has been adopted of constructing 10 factory shells annually. This initiative is expected to attract investments totaling 1.047 billion emelangeni and generate approximately 4,000 new employment opportunities each year. In this budget, we have provided 140 million emelangeni for the construction of factory shells. Mr. Speaker, government spending on health care is undeniably crucial for the well-being of our nation. Tremendous progress has been made in reducing and managing the spread of HIV, TB, malaria, and other diseases. Indicators show that currently 97% of people living with HIV know their HIV status. 98.3% of people with a known HIV positive diagnosis receive antiretroviral therapy, and 98.4% of people receiving ARTs are virally suppressed. In addition, 64% of the clients initiated on ARTs have reported to have disclosed the HIV status to their family members, sexual partners, or other colleagues. Such gains are commendable and need to be sustained going forward. Mr. Speaker, TB accounts for nearly 1/3 of all AIDS-related deaths, making it a leading cause of mortality in people living with HIV. Hence, we should ensure that TB interventions are effective. It's encouraging that the TB treatment success rate currently stands at 84%, illustrating an improvement of about 4 percentage points from the figure last reported. Mr. Speaker, the nation cannot prosper if our children are not healthy and protected. At present, the national immunization coverage, as measured by the DPT-3 proxy indicator, is at 67%, and full immunization coverage is at 68%, according to the MR1 proxy indicator. In order to reduce mortality of those under 5 years old, our vaccination programs will continue to be supported. The human papillomavirus is the leading cause for cervical cancer in women and girls globally. To deal with this, the government took a policy decision to vaccinate girls between 9 and 14 years of age against this disease. Remarkable progress has been made as the vaccination rate is at 73.6% nationally. In the third quarter of 2024-25 financial year, a second dose of the same age group was introduced for immune-compromised girls. The plan is to extend immunization against HPV to ages 15 to 20 in 2025-2026. Mr. Speaker, we are now facing a relatively new phenomenon on the rise of non-communicable diseases, what we refer to as NCDs. This calls for the strengthening of prevention and health promotion programs and interventions, as well as the adoption of a healthy lifestyle by every Liswati. Significant progress is being made in repurposing the former TB hospital in Manzini to an NCD facility. A high dependency unit has been completed and preparations are ongoing to conduct the radiation oncology department, to construct that department, the nuclear medicine section. The high dependency unit is meant to cater for critically ill NCD patients, including those with cancer and those that have suffered from a stroke, amongst other complications. Tertiary health services in the country have been improved through the hiring of more medical specialists and commissioning of 2 new theatres in the new referral and emergency complex at the Mbabane Government Hospital. It is anticipated that the number of referred medical cases closer to the communities, the Hlatikulu Public Health Unit was structured and has been completed and commissioned. Rehabilitation of wards 4 and 5 at the National Psychiatric Hospital and renovations to the outpatient department at Lebombo Referral Hospital were also completed. The network of health facilities shall be improved through the completion and operationalization of Ndondozi, New Haven, and Induna Itsini clinics. Mr. Speaker, we acknowledge the challenges that we are all facing in the delivery of medicines to Emaswati that are in dire need. Even though efforts have been made to correct this, these efforts still seem insufficient as there's still an outcry of the shortage of drugs. We plan to solve this persistent problem by transforming the central medical stores into a semi-autonomous entity. With assistance from the Global Fund, the government has engaged a consultant who is currently working on the logistics for the transformation. This will ensure that medicines are bought on time, at the right price, are correctly stored, are tracked from CMS all the way through to the patient, and it'll heavily reduce the amount of medicines expiring. An allocation of 40 million emalangeni has been provided in this budget specifically for this transformation. Mr. Speaker, the 90 days pause of funding from US aid has caused a lot of stress in the system, and as we've become reliant on this funding. The US government's PEPFAR program has funded critical health staffing, systems, and health commodities for HIV treatment and prevention. Fortunately, the US government recently reinstated limited portions of its funding for urgent life-saving HIV care and treatment services. We continue to work closely with the US Embassy during this difficult time. In the medium term, the government will embark on the following priority areas: establishment of a National Public Health Institute to lead and coordinate essential public health functions, sustain Eswatini's Prevention Center clinical research site, rehabilitation of maternity theatres at Matanjeni, Mkuzweni, Nhlangano Health Center, and treatment plant for Bogolwago Health Center, operationalization of the neonatal intensive care unit at Mbabane Government Hospital, and the construction of the radiation oncology department and nuclear medicine section. Government is allocating 3.1 billion emalangeni to the health sector to implement the above and other priority areas. Mr. Speaker, the employment bill, which seeks to repeal the Employment Act of 1980, was tabled in Parliament as Bill number 7 of 2023. Unfortunately, the 11th Parliament was dissolved before the completion of the legislative process. Cabinet has approved the bill, and we shall be tabling it to this August House soon. Mr. Speaker, the budget allocates an additional 55.3 million emalangeni to the scholarship program to cater for the additional intake of 1,000 students awarded study loans for the 2024-2025 academic year. This has raised the number up to 4,450 students for local institutions, including 80 students who will be studying outside the country to support the acquisition of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, often referred to as STEM, rare skills, which are not offered in the country. Government has allocated a total of 702.35 million emalangeni for scholarships in the 2025-26 financial year. There are currently 18 regulated sectors of the economy and the same number of wages councils that are appointed by the Minister of Labour and Social Security. The wages councils are comprised of a tripartite, sorry Mr. Speaker, I'm getting that in four times round, I've got a fourth time lucky. Tripartite, yeah. Structure whereby the government, employers, and workers each have 6 representatives to facilitate negotiations of wages and other minimum terms and conditions of service. The 18 wages councils have over the last 2 years managed to diligently carry out their work such that the percentage range of negotiated increases of the minimum wages for 2023 average between 4 and 20% and between 5 and 20% in 2024. This has resulted that the average minimum wage has increased by 8.8% annually for the past 2 years. With this increase being about double the inflation figures, we believe that it's going to reduce the percentage of inequality in Eswatini. Government will also construct 2 trade testing workshops which will be used to test apprentices and artisans in the welding and plumbing fields. This will help clear the huge backlog of apprentices waiting to be grade tested and in turn contributes to a reduction of youth unemployment. A budget has been provided of 821.76 million emalangeni to the Ministry of Labour and Social Security to execute its mandate. Mr. Speaker, the government of the King of Eswatini remains steadfast in ensuring that quality education remains accessible to all in Maswati. Government has continued to employ teachers, especially those who have been on contracts for long periods of time, according to the needs in different schools. This has systematically been done using the Human Resource Information Management System, which uses identity numbers of employees. In the previous financial year, a total of 364 teachers were converted to permanent and pensionable positions. Mr. Speaker, following the ongoing pilot of the 4-year secondary program, the government will be introducing qualifications beyond EGCSE in 2026, wherein 4 out of 7 earmarked secondary schools will be offering A, S, and A levels. The rollout will follow a staggered approach, starting with 1 school in each region. These are Mhlume, Mhlatane, Manzini Nazarene, and Evelyn Bering High School. At Sibaya, the quality of education and other learning platforms were highly criticized for lacking relevance, exemplified by the increase in graduates' unemployment rates. To this end, the government has commissioned a high-level committee of experts to propose a transformation program for the education sector. The education transformation will ensure that the education system produces graduates that are skilled to make sustainable livelihoods for themselves and for others. Mr. Speaker, we are aware of the difficulties at UNESWA. The University of Eswatini continues to face a number of challenges despite the increase in subventions in the recent years. The challenges include poor financial management, non-remittance of medical aid and pensions payable for personnel, poor research output, and archaic academic programs, to mention a few. The state of affairs has led to numerous class boycotts and has greatly compromised the quality of education and the university's global rankings. In order to solve the UNESCO crisis permanently and ensure that the university gets back to its former glory, the government commissioned a task team to investigate the issues and come up with pragmatic recommendations. To this end, the task team has presented an interim report, and the government will commission a forensic audit while also implementing some of the short-term recommendations proposed by the task team interim report. Government is allocating 4.2 billion emalangeni to the recurrent budget and 316 million emalangeni to the capital budget to the Ministry of Education and Training. the government has increased the budget for school feeding by 33 million emalangeni. In addition, 194 million has been allocated for the OVC fund and 702.35 million emalangeni for scholarships, equaling a total of 5.41 billion emalangeni for the provision of education and training for all levels in the country. This represents a 16.6% of the total budget spent on educating Yamaswat. Mr. Speaker, government has continued to support the vulnerable populations through cash transfers to elderly persons and persons with disabilities. Currently, there are 84,740 elderly grant beneficiaries and 17,468 beneficiaries of grants for persons with disabilities, referred to as PWDs. In line with His Majesty's pronouncement, this financial year, government has allocated an additional 105 million emalangeni to cater for the increase in the elderly grant received by the elderly, which is a 20% increase, mainly to cushion the cost of living adjustments experienced throughout the economy, adding 100 emalangeni to the current 500 emalangeni monthly, bringing it up to 600 emalangeni per month. Government has also budgeted to increase the number of persons with disabilities receiving the national grant by 2,500 and adding 50 emalangeni to each recipient, raising the monthly amount received to 450 emalangeni. For the 2025-2026 financial year, the government of Eswatini will move all beneficiaries to the mobile money platform, referred to as MOMO, for grant payments to ensure efficiency and a cost reduction amounting to about 2.9 million emalangeni per annum. Following the submissions made during the Sibaya National Dialogue, the government, through the Deputy Prime Minister's Office, has conducted a community outreach program in all 4 regions to identify vulnerabilities and other social ills that require immediate social protection interventions. Among the key deliverables to the poor and vulnerable population is the provision of a decent shelter. Through the support of partners in the current year, the government, through the DPM's office, has managed to construct 20 houses for the needy and vulnerable people, including elderly persons, persons with disabilities, and child-headed households. In the 2025 to 2026 financial year, government has made an allocation towards the construction of houses with backyard gardens, fencing, and water tanks to promote water harvesting in order for households to access clean and safe drinking water. Mr. Speaker, the government of Eswatini is committed to inclusiveness and mainstreaming of disability issues in both the public and private sector. Government has launched the National Disability Plan of Action from 2024 to 13 million emalangeni to strengthen the services provided in the education and health sectors on human capital development of persons with disabilities. To deliver on the mandate for the PWDs, the government of Eswatini has provided the budget to establish the Secretariat and ensure that the office delivers the aspirations of the PWDs as specified in the National Plan of Action. Mr. Speaker, the government has allocated 1.07 billion emalangeni to the Deputy Prime Minister's Office in order to continue with these essential services of taking care of the most vulnerable. Mr. Speaker, agriculture remains the industry that could have can have the biggest positive impact on our economy in the short term. We have tens of thousands of hectares of unused terraced agriculture land in Eswatini, and we have a big unemployment problem. This is a recipe for a wonderful win-win if we could farm economically on small pieces of land. Many countries in the East have large percentages of their population successfully farming on small pieces of land economically. We have spoken about this many times over the years, but with food security being a focus area in the program of action, the Ministry of Agriculture is now starting a few projects to deal with this. One of them is a smallholder agriculture productivity and market enhancement project, what we refer to as SWAPEM, which is scheduled to launch in May 2025 through the Eswatini Water and Agriculture Development Enterprise, EWADE. This project has a budget allocation of 60.4 million emalangeni. SWAPEM aims to empower over 17,000 smallholder farmers, particularly in the vulnerable southeastern regions of the country. Mr. Speaker, the IDA funding referred to earlier will be used for another youth agriculture project. We have provided 50 million emalangeni in this year's budget for this project will be taking off soon. The government has allocated 65 million to the National Maize Corporation in the 2025-2026 financial year for the input subsidy and tractor hire program, which is designed to benefit smallholder farmers in the sector. A provision of 40 million emalangeni has been made in the budget for commercial maize farming and 14 million to add to the Hambabuya project funding. An additional 10 million has been allocated to top up the Agriculture Development Fund. We would like to express our sincere gratitude to the Republic of China on Taiwan for its generous support in establishing the Aquaculture Research and Production Center in Malkerns. This initiative will significantly enhance fish production in Eswatini. The center will focus on developing innovative systems to increase productivity, producing fingerlings for distribution to fish farmers, and contributing to the eventual commercialization of fish production nationwide. The Republic of China on Taiwan has also given us a grant of 51.5 million emalangeni for building 2 more grain silos in Eswatini. The construction of the Mpageni Dam, Phase 1A, is progressing as planned, and we are pleased to announce that the necessary financial resources for the main conveyance system, Phase 1B, has been secured from international financiers. The simultaneous implementation of both phases will ensure the efficient delivery of water to the targeted areas, with a dedicated budget allocation of 737.36 million emalangeni in the 2025-2026 financial year. This project will be a transformative force for the Shiselweni region. Furthermore, Phase 1B of the Mkonongwa Water Augmentation Project, MWAB, will commence in 2025-2026, focusing on the construction of the main conveyance system to facilitate the efficient distribution of water upon completion of the Mpageni Dam. This budget has also provided 46.5 million for the construction of medium and small dams around the country. The Lucid Phase 2 project remains a priority, with an additional budget of 230 million emalangeni. The project is currently in the process of installing in-field infrastructure, and its timely completion will be instrumental in delivering the anticipated benefits to our citizens. Mr. Speaker, livestock production continues to play a vital role in sustaining the livelihoods of our rural communities. Despite challenges posed by foot and mouth disease outbreaks in neighboring countries, Eswatini has successfully maintained its disease-free status. The government is actively working on the implementation of the Eswatini livestock value chain, which includes the rehabilitation of cordon fences funded by the European Union. A budget of 30.4 million has been provided for this. This initiative is crucial for the control and prevention of transboundary animal diseases, while also addressing concerns relating to stock theft. For the 2025-26 financial year, the government has allocated 1.65 billion emalangeni to the Ministry of Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, the government of Eswatini is on a strong drive to finance water and sanitation projects to support economic, health, and social developments aligned with the National Development Plan and the Sustainable Development Goals. These projects are central to the government's efforts to achieve 100% safe drinking water coverage across the country. The government has implemented the Eswatini Water Supply and Sanitation Project, estimated to cost 1.2 billion emalangeni in the Shiselweni region. This project will benefit 49,230 people with improved water supply and sanitation. The project is expected to be completed by the end of 2026.
Kanti-ke kuthulwa kwamaphakelo alo live lomhla bekukade kulokuhle sibili njengoba bekukade kunebantu labahlukahlukene lokufaka ekhathi labachamuka enhlangothini lwetemfundo njengoba kubonakele abantwana besikolo labachamuka kito isikolo letiphasi kanjalo nebantu besikolo labachamuka esikolweni lesisetulu nabo lesibe nelithuba lekukhulumisana nabo sengumsakato kuva ukuthi ingabe njengoba bebela endlini yePhalamende bativela kanjani bavetile ukuthi bayathokota kakhulu futhi kuningi lebakufundzile lokufaka ekhathi ukuthi tandla ishaya ePhalamende kanjalo nokuthi ePhalamende nakuthula yona emaphakelo imvuna ibangileyo ke lekhuluma ukuthi kuyofika kona kuphetha kwayo inkulumo yayo Kimberly Mavuso elihlelweni iPhalamende lomuhla ngihambisana mlandvo Methula naJulisa Mamba ePhalamende.